time.
All right.
All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the professional engineering panel. We're so excited to have you. Carrie Lovelace and myself will be your hostesses tonight. That's unusual for Triangle, 2 hostesses, but we hope that you enjoy it. We have 3 great PEs. I have had the pleasure of knowing all 3 of these gentlemen since I started with Triangle 8 years ago. They are great guys, very knowledgeable. They were sharing some things with me that I didn't know about the PE, and so hopefully they'll share some things with you that you guys don't know and prepare you to take the exam. I am going to be monitoring the chat box for questions, so if you've got them, please put them in the chat box. Carrie is in charge of muting and unmuting everybody, and so if you are talking, please just remember you're muted. Ask it in the chat box and we'll make sure it gets answered. And I am going to get this party started. Which of the 3 of our speakers would like to go first? Raise your hand, no pressure. All right, Eli's gonna go. I was gonna say, if no one raises their hand, I'm gonna pick. So, all right, Eli.
It's Triangle. Whoever doesn't volunteer, step backwards. So my name is Eli Maschie. As the little bio said, I got an electrical engineering undergraduate degree with a minor in mathematics, and I'm currently working with electrical power utilities as a consultant. Beyond that, they had asked, what's a little bit of work experience, family experience, fun stuff. I am currently married. I've been married for 2 years. And then beyond that, I'm also a 3rd degree black belt in Taekwondo. So when there isn't a pandemic, I get to do that.
All right. Next. Adam, thank you.
Adam Broder from Milwaukee School of Engineering. I settled in Oconomowoc, just west of Milwaukee. I've got a degree in architectural engineering with a structural emphasis. I'm currently a structural engineer for a design build contractor, MSI General Inc. The lone engineer supporting 8 architects, and passed the structural engineering exam in 2014. Oh, one thing for the audience, if you could do something for me, go in the chat box and put in your graduation date, either expected or actual, and your major, and maybe we can kind of tailor some of this presentation toward who we got here. Thank you.
All right, last but not least, Mr. Jake Hopert.
Well, first I'd like to hear what Adam likes to do for fun.
I don't do much for fun.
Oh, come on, Adam.
Honestly, really.
This is fun. What I'm going to say that I do for fun is volunteer for Triangle and play with my little one. Anyway, my name's Jake Hopert. I'm a chemical engineer for a company called Black & Veatch. We're the largest engineering, procurement, and construction firm in the world. Our main focus is in power plant design, but we also do water, so municipal water and water systems. We do telecom. We did Sprint's 5G network, and we did Tesla's power charging station throughout the U.S. I got my PE in 2018, I think. Yeah. And yeah, I have an 18-month-old daughter, so in my free time, I like to hang out with her. And in my other free time, I volunteer for Triangle and in my church.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I see some of you guys are, you've taken Adam up on his request to put where you're from, what your year is, whether you're taking the PE or you have taken it. So excited to see that. I know that Adam, Eli, and Jake are all scrolling through the chat to like Adam said, kind of tailor this to what they're, to what you guys are looking for. I'm gonna do a really easy question for our panelists and just kind of ask them why they wanted a PE. I think that's a great place to start, and I think that will lead us to some good questions.
So for myself, I wasn't originally thinking I might need a PE. Typically, electrical engineers get into a field where you don't need a PE. But then I ended up working at a consulting firm And I'm glad I had already taken the fundamentals of engineering, the FE exam, because to consult and do your own designs and stamp your own designs, you are required by law to be a registered professional engineer. So that's why I took it. It helped continue, let me grow in my business that I had chosen. You're muted.
Adam, you're muted.
Majoring in structural, basically, you kind of have to if you want to have that next part in your career. See, we got a lot of other people majoring in building construction. So just the laws of the land, if you're if you're doing anything with buildings whatsoever, you know, a PE is kind of a must for your career. But for some of the other people that aren't, you know, in building construction, there's weird things with government contracts. There's, you know, if you're going to apply for a government job in the GS like 15 level, they require state licensure in some capacity, no matter what the discipline. But then, you know, the last thing is basically your high school guidance counselor told you, you know, you need to have extracurriculars in foreign language in order to get into college, and your college guidance counselor is telling you you need to be in a student org and be in a professional society in order to get a good job out of college. And so I'm going to play that same role and say, take the PE to differentiate yourself from the field.
Yeah, so for me, similar situation to Eli. My background's chemical engineering. There are not a lot of chemical PEs. People that go into chemical engineering typically don't need to take the PE. My senior year, I realized that I really liked design, and so I applied for a job at a design firm, and my company requires all engineers to get their PE, so that's why I got my PE.
On the topic of the PE and hearing you guys say that, you know, you needed it for your job, did you guys pay for that or did your company pay for it? And if your company paid for it, how did you go about asking them to do that?
So for mine, I paid for it myself. However, it was understood I'd get reimbursed the expenses, assuming I passed. And that was one, because it is a consulting firm I work for, similar to Jake, which is a consulting firm. It's sort of expected you will take your PE once you can actually sit for it. So asking about taking it really wasn't that much of an issue. You might actually have a boss or a department manager come up and say, you know, I think you're able to sit for your PE, are you? Great, let's figure out a time when you can sit for that and sort of come up with a game plan.
I paid for mine just because of where I was in my career at the time. That's a story for another day. But yeah, certainly if you're in a place in a company that, you know, has a program or whatever, has some kind of reimbursement, it's definitely something to talk to your employer about. Be engaged with the people you work with, especially if there's anyone around you who's licensed. We'll get into that. I'll get into a little of that later.
Yeah, so for me, I also paid for it myself. My company gives paid time off for the day you sit the exam, and then when you successfully pass it, an engineering credential bonus that covers the cost and then some, but you're expected to pay for your own test and materials until you pass it.
In that same, Eli kind of opened this, you know, it's expected, you know, your supervisor will come to you and say, I think you're ready to take the PE exam, you know, because you've practiced engineering for enough time to be able to sit for it. How did you guys personally decide that, yeah, I was ready to do it, outside of needing to do it to advance in your career, but just personally that you felt you had enough experience under your belt, or what other motivation made you pull the trigger to say, okay, yeah, I'm ready for it?
Yep. So Adam was alluding to this before everyone got on. In order to sit for your PE exam, one, you have to graduate from an accredited engineering program. Two, you have to work for a minimum of 4 years underneath another PE before you're allowed to apply to even take the exam. So for me, I was just sort of keeping track of that 4-year period from when I graduated. And once that timeline hit, then I started applying immediately because I knew the longer I waited, it was just going to be harder and harder to try and take the exam as work responsibilities and life responsibilities got pressed on you more. It's tougher to find the time to actually take it. So I tried to make sure I could do it as quickly as I could.
Yeah, exactly the same. Being that it's a career thing, the moment you're eligible, and I'll kind of piggyback on that. The first like background advice for people considering this track is become familiar with your state laws, because the professional engineering licensure is governed by each state individually. There isn't a federal thing. So become familiar with the laws of your state. You know, go to the agency's website. In Wisconsin, it's Department of Safety and Professional Services, and there's all sorts of information in the application pages and the deadlines and what are the governing statutes. For any structural civil people in the house, you know, are you a separate professional engineer, structural engineer state? How many references are you required to have? How many of those references need to be licensed PEs? Another odd thing, there's this doctrine called responsible charge. Do you live in a state that's a responsible charge state? And all that is like your references need to be able to speak to, can I leave this person alone and trust them? And so sometimes you can get responsible charge out of a reference and sometimes you can't. I've known people that where their boss said, no, I'm not giving you any responsible charge experience. And they, their career suffered a little bit because of it. And so, you know, number one is state laws. And number two, keep an ongoing dialogue with your employer. If you work with licensed people, if you only work with one licensed person and you need 3 licensed people, find some other licensed people that might be able to sign for you, either clients, other people, teachers, you know, keep in touch with those people.
Yeah, I guess to add on to that, and clarify a couple points. So I think the most important thing is know your state, and Adam touched on that. But for example, Michigan, you know, the reason I got my PE when I got it is because I wanted to get my bonus as soon as possible. I'll be completely frank, it was solely financial, and I would never do it for any other reason, in my opinion. But Michigan, at the time that I took my PE, had this, you know, requirement of 4 years of study under a professional engineer to take the PE. And when I qualified for that 4 years, Michigan changed the law. And all you have to do to take the Michigan PE is to have passed the fundamentals of engineering exam. And then the 4-year requirement happens afterwards before you can get your license. So the only other thing that I'd say is, you know, laws vary by state. In Michigan, you only need 1 reference now. You used to need 5 when I did it. But the other thing is, the sooner you can take it, the better, because in your career, it's not always likely that you're going to be doing the work that is going to keep the PE fresh. Maybe for a structural engineer, right? I mean, structures, as far as I know, and Adam, you can tell me if I'm wrong, they don't change too much. If you're working with structures, you're working with structures and you're just going to get more experience. I got my degree in chemical engineering. The only time I've stamped drawings were mechanical engineering drawings that I could confidently say that I, you know, oversaw the design of. But you're going to get questions that are like college questions, and the longer you wait, the less you'll remember how to answer college questions. And so, like, my questions were on distillations and reactions, and I hadn't done a distillation reaction problem since I was an undergrad. So that's another thing to consider.
Sorry to chime in, but I wanted to mention, you guys were talking about all the states that you're practicing in. So it's also really important to know what state you're in and what states you're actually going to also be practicing in. Because some firms, like I'm in Arizona, we do work in Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, everywhere, like all the states that are touching. And In Arizona, you can sit in the exam as soon as you pass your FE, but New Mexico requires you to have your 4 years of experience before you take your PE. So the best thing that you can do is get 4 years of experience before you take your test, no matter what state you're going to practice in. I think that's generally that covers everything, but be aware of other states you could potentially practice in as well.
That, John, you kind of, that was the next kind of question that I was going to ask everybody is, how do you go about, I know I'm like, he just teed it up for me perfectly. How do you go about, so like Eli, Adam, and Jake, you guys all live in different states.
Yep.
And you're licensed in states that you don't live in. So how does that work to take the PE exam? Like, Eli, you're licensed in Texas, but you live in Colorado. Like, how does that work? Adam, I know you're licensed in Colorado. How does that work for you in Wisconsin? So share a little bit about that, because I'm personally interested in how that works.
That's a good question. To give background to help with the explanation, as Amy was saying, I'm registered in multiple states. I live in Colorado and I took my first PE exam in Colorado. Since I took that exam about 10 years ago now, I have gained Texas, Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Utah, and New Hampshire as PEs. All of those because I work in a consulting business and I had clients in those states, so I needed PE in that state to work. Thankfully, things have gotten much better now. I saw that John had posted a link about passing rates from the NCEES, which is the National Council of Engineering. Do you know what it is, Adam?
Examination of Engineers and Surveyors.
Thank you. Most every state now, not necessarily all 50, but most, if you pass in one state, you can upload your credentials into their system. And then if you want to get a PE in another state, they'll pass all of your credentials to that state. And then you just have to pass the little bit of difference for that state. So for example, Texas, you'd have to sit for an eight-hour PE exam, just like Colorado does. But then they have an auxiliary exam that's 40 questions on their local rules and regulations for PE that you get to take online. So when I applied for Texas, once all of my paperwork cleared, I just went online and took the exam. It took me like 2 or 2.5 hours because I'd never read their rules and regs before. So I was literally searching right when I was answering stuff. State of Utah, same thing. Theirs was a 12-question exam. If you got one wrong, you failed it and you had to do it again.
Oh, wow.
And I got
the ethics test.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they worded it. A lot of them are based on the rules and regs. Can you stamp this? Can you not stamp this? Under this condition, are you allowed to stamp? And some of them, they get really tricky on how they word it. There's minor wording differences compared to the rules and regs. So that's typically what you have to look for. I know if you start getting into California, which I don't have, and Alaska, which I don't have, and Adam will probably be able to talk to this as a structural. It's not just a ethics type exam with the rules and regs. There's a lot of extra examination because it has its own unique circumstances there.
Yeah, it's changed a little bit over the years. The states used to have their own homegrown structural exam, but now that there's the SE exam through NCEES. So NCEES again, well, the way this was introduced to me, my first job out of college, I was working for a Triangle brother hired me, and we were working on coal stores all over the country. And he was only licensed in Wisconsin and then needed to real quick get a lot of licenses. And I walk into his office one day and he's got a whole ton of paperwork on his desk. And he just looked over at me and he screamed, "If you learn one thing from me, it's get an NCES record as soon as you can so that you don't have to do this." And hey, the man told me one thing he learned. So it's sort of an after thing for the PE exam. You sign up for the NCES record. You can read all about that on their webpage. I don't have to explain that. Just go to NCES.org and surf that page for a while. After after searching your state's website. Surf your state's website and then surf NCES and read all about it. Some things to particularly pay attention to on NCES is test specification. So every test that you take will have a specification. There's going to be this many questions. It's going to be this much time. There's going to be this many questions in this area. There's going to be this number of questions in this area. There's going to be this number of questions in this area. So look at the test spec, especially for the FE. There's a FE reference manual that every single candidate has.
Yep.
Download it, print it, study it. Everything you need to take the FE exam is in there. I remember there was like an open channel flow equation, and I did architectural. I didn't do civil, so never learned any of that stuff, but flipped through the book and I was like, oh yeah. Here are the equations for that. And you look at the question and it's like, okay, input 1, 2, 3. Oh, here's the equation, back solve this equation. And I got an open channel flow question just because I downloaded, printed, and studied the reference book ahead of time. And then for, and there's test specifications for different disciplines. Like, Jake took the chemical engineering and said he encountered that question that he hadn't done in a long time. But, maybe you want to take the architectural exam. Maybe you want to take the general exam. Maybe you want to take the civil exam. The PE is the PE, no matter which exam you take. So that's another thing to look at. And then especially for the PE, there's suggested references, and like the codes that are going to be used to govern that exam. So definitely check all that stuff out on nces.org.
Jake, is there anything that you want to add?
I only have one license, so no.
Oh, only one just now. Maybe you'll feel inspired to get more.
Yeah, if my employer tells me to get one. I was about to get the Tennessee one and then reassigned to a different job. So that's why I would get another one, is because I was told to.
Yeah, and with the NCES record, you just keep your references up to date every year. You pay $75. You get your record mailed, and you have your other PVE license in like 5 days. So super easy to do if your career takes you down that path. I was on that path a while ago, but now the company I work for, we only do work in Wisconsin, and I'm just going to let the other ones lapse.
Yep.
I don't need them anymore.
If you let your PE lapse in a different state, how hard is it to get recertified? You don't know?
It depends. I mean, if I were to let my Wisconsin one lapse, which was my original, that'd probably be a problem. In the other states, I might just have to pay a late fee and then probably do like extra continuing ed, just like produce records of the continuing ed. Yeah. So like I've got continuing ed records for my Wisconsin license, and I'm keeping records for those. But like if 10 years from now I need the Colorado one again, I could just give them all the records, or maybe they'll just take the NCES record again. I don't know. Cross that bridge when we come to it.
Yeah, from coworker's experience, he had a Iowa PE that he let lapse because he didn't need it, and then he wanted to get it reinstated. And I think you're right, Adam, that he had to pay, a fee, because you normally have to pay a fee when you renew every 1 or 2 years, depending on the state. And then depending on the state, there's a continuing education requirement. Colorado is a weird one where there is no continuing ed requirement in Colorado. But yeah, for him, I believe Iowa required 30 hours of continuing education every 2 years. Some jurisdiction, it's 15 every 1 year, so it works out to the same. It's just when you get it. So he had to find a way to get 30 continuing education hours while he was working full time so that he could get his PE renewed and then pay the fee to do that. And then there's extra paperwork to get it renewed, but you know, it's not that he had it taken away from him. He just, you know, didn't renew it. So
how do you, hearing you guys talk about this and that different states have different requirements, how do you go about studying for the PE? I am very curious. You guys were sharing a little bit ahead of time your setup to study. Adam, I know you're going to share your screen. You have a setup that you had, but I'd love to hear how you guys prepped for it and how long you prepped for it. Did it take you, was it something like 3 weeks before you started, before you knew you were going to take your test, that you started studying, or was it something that you just, you know, your 4 years of experience prepared you for it?
Let me jump in on this one
Yes.
first, because I think that you should really listen to what these guys have to say on this. I took 20 minutes to look over a practice exam, and I said, I'm done with this. I'm not studying anymore. And I took the exam and I passed.
Wow.
I wasn't allowed references. I think you know how well you are at taking tests and how effective you are at searching indices of references that have been provided for you or that you bring. And so if you are good at searching indices, in my opinion, it'll work out. I mean, the FE, I think, was harder than the PE because like I got questions about, you know, mechanical statics and civil engineering things that I'd never looked at. And so it was, you know, questions about magnetic fields induced through electric current with wires that I had never seen before. And that was tough because I had no idea what was going on. But do what these guys tell you to do.
I'll let Adam go next.
I was in graduate school at the time, so I pretty much had been studying like 5 days a week for 3 years. Yeah, I see someone just asked about PPI. I went on PPI to pass, and I almost threw a beer can at a wall when I saw that like the bundle of study books was like $600, and I thought that was an insane amount of money to spend. And then I was like, you know, this is the rest of your career we're talking about. So I bought the whole suite of SE study books, the whole bundle, and it was invaluable actually. So I can rant about college textbooks scams for a while, but those study books, they're literally licensed. So Kaplan is licensing the questions from NCES. So you're studying actual questions that are written by the people that write the exam. And that is a very big deal. You know, so this was my, where are we?
Hey, Adam, while you're looking that up, if you weren't allowed to bring your own references, do you also think it would have been just as invaluable to purchase those books?
There is no way I could have passed the structural engineering exam without references. You can't do it.
Got it. Yeah, looking at that pass rates page, so it seems as though many more are now computer based, and so I think that you won't be able to. Fewer and fewer are going to allow references. Wow, look at that.
Yeah, so you know, Jake said, you know, you're going to know how much you're going to need to study. So I wanted to spend that $500 on the books, and then I ripped those books apart and kind of reorganized everything. And then, you know, my advice is to be organized, and be organized in a way that you think makes sense to you. To me, I organized the structural engineering exam by discipline. So my plan of attack was number 1 through 10 in the middle. So there's like general questions, like the ethics questions. Then there's statics questions. Those are the easy ones. So of the 60 questions you get, flip through them, find all the general questions, answer those. flip through the book again, find all the statics questions, answers those. All right, now you got about 6 questions under your belt, you're feeling good. Then ASCE 7 is loading code. Those are kind of easy, but now you're starting to get into structural. And now I want to hit like the stuff I'm good at. I'm good at steel. I'm good at concrete. I'm good at masonry. I'm less good at wood, but I can. I don't know anything about bridge design, and I don't know anything about light gauge steel design. And so those were like, there were only like 3 bridge questions on the exam and only like 2 light gauge steel questions on the exam. And then I also organized all the stacks of code books here so that you can see the steel code books on the top. So when I finished all the steel questions, I put those books on the floor, and then the concrete code books are next. And when I finished all the concrete code questions, I put those books on the floor. So then as the exam went on, the desk was a lot less cluttered and starting to feel a lot better. And then I took this picture and I printed it out and I put it on the front of the white binder you see open with read the directions twice. By the way, do that. Read the directions twice.
Yep.
For each question. You got the time, and then do a second pass all the way from the beginning. If you got 5.5 hours for the test and you finish it in 3.5, go through it again because you got 5.5 hours. Use that time. You got all that time. And so when I got in there in the morning and, I'm nervous, I just pulled out the piece of paper. I set the desk up exactly how I planned it out the night before. And then I was like, okay, this is my safe space. I feel good here. I feel organized. I know where everything is. And then, like we said earlier, in engineering, you just got to be able to know how to use the index and find stuff.
Yep.
Adam, your choice of snacks is atrocious.
Well, you had to have your driver's license on the table. So that was just where I put it. I think I had a bottle of water, a cup of coffee, and like some gummy bears and nuts and stuff like that. But I didn't put those out the night before.
Well, and then, so to remind everyone, Amy's original question was, how do you study? How long do you study? So Jake didn't. Adam did pretty good. He knew pretty quick he was going to buy the materials to study. I was in between the two. The recommendation that you typically hear, you can read it online, you'll get from other PEs if you're in a consulting firm, is plan to study starting 4 months before the exam and study every day for about an hour. So I had fully intended to do that, but I was working more than full time because I was consultant. So deadlines are deadlines. It doesn't matter if I'm working 40 hours or not. And I let a month go by and like, okay, it's 3 months before the exam, I'll start studying. I decided instead of studying, since we had a lot of people at my company who were the exact same PE that I took, and I took a power engineer PE, we had people who had recently taken the exams like a year or two before. So we had sort of a library of study materials and sample questions. And for me, sample questions, like Adam was saying, are crucial because they are exactly the same type of questions you're going to get, just maybe with different numbers.
Bob Baslaw said that in the comments. He's like, I bought the ASME course.
Yep.
He said one of the questions was exactly the same. So
Yep.
I think what the theme is, buy the books.
Yep. But what I did is the sample question library that we had about a total of like 40 questions in it, maybe 60. And I decided 3 months before the exam, because I'd already lost a month just working and losing track of time, I was going to do the exams without studying just to see where I was at. And I decided I would do 10 questions a day and give myself an hour to do 10 questions, because at least when I was taking the exam, you had 4 hours for 40 questions. So I was giving myself that time. I got through all 40 of them in about 4 days. After I got through all 40 of them, then I went and graded it and found I did horribly. I made the exact same mistake on like 40% of the problems. I divided when I should have multiplied. I was off by a factor of 2. Like I just screwed up the same things over and over. And that scared me so badly. And I'd already wasted at that point, so much time. We were getting to like 10 weeks before the exam. I went on to the NCES website and purchased the most recent study materials for the exam I was going to take. So that got me up to a total of like 160 sample questions. I made sure, as Adam had said before, to look at what reference materials were required, because for power engineers, you have to be able to interpret the National Electric Code book. I work with power utilities. You don't have to follow the National Electric Code. So I had to learn how to interpret the National Electric Code, and a third of the questions were on it. So I had to learn how to use that book, and I had to buy the book besides the study materials. And then I just did all 6.
Show them your tabs. Show them the tabs on the side of your NEC.
Yep. So here's the NEC that I bought. Then here's the tabs. I'm not sure if everyone can see that, but I
can't navigate that book without those tabs.
Section, so that it's quick and easy to flip through. Like you said, look at the index. Oh, it's in chapter whatever, and you can flip to it quick and learn how to interpret it. But without that study material, I would have never passed, because so much of my career is not what's on the exam for power engineering. Power engineering is such a broad term. They assume you're going to be wiring commercial buildings, you're going to be wiring an industrial setting, you're going to be wiring houses, you're going to be doing HVAC installations, and then a little bit with electrical power utilities. So it's like I had to know all of this, even though I wasn't dealing with 75% of the material. Then what I had to do is I knuckled down and I studied 2 hours every day for like 9 straight weeks doing the practice problems. And I got through all 160 of them. And if I was giving myself 2 hours, I'd do 20 problems. Got through all 160, kept making mistakes on some of them. So then I did all 160 of them again. Then I did it a third time. Then I did it a fourth time. And that's when you train yourself not to make the stupid mistakes that I kept making. And you'll know you're ready for the exam when, like, I was to the point where I almost had the question memorized and knew exactly how to do it by hand. And I just wanted to be able to take the exam a week before because there's nothing else I could study. That's when I knew I was ready to be able to take it. I don't know how it's going to be now. When Adam and I took it, it was an open book exam. So you had to bring your references with you. You could bring a 3-ring binder, which had all of my correct step-by-step answers to every problem I took. So if I saw a similar problem on the exam and I, got test anxiety, I could just flip to that problem and go, okay, this is my ABC step, just plug in the new number and this is how I solve it. For your exam, if it is in person, one of the other things is look at what calculator you're allowed. Everyone uses a graphing calculator now. I was allowed nothing above a TI-30X.
TI-30X.
So learn how to use that calculator because it's different. So learn that. And then following into how to properly take the test. The people who wrote my test were sadistic. The 6 toughest questions out of the 40 for each half of the exam, it was 40 in the morning, 40 in the afternoon. The 6 toughest questions were the first 6. And they're meant to just like frazzle you and freak you out. So the other good advice I'd gotten from coworkers, which was great, is read every question on the exam before even trying to answer it. I didn't read every one of them, but I got freaked out on the first 6. And then by the time I got to question 15, I went, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know how to answer these. So I didn't answer the first 6 to begin with. I answered from like question 7 on to know I could get those right. And then I had more than enough time I could go back and answer 1 through 6. And as someone else had pointed out, there was a sample question that I never knew how to get the answer they got in the book. But that exact question was on the exam. So I knew what the answer was because of that reference material. But that's basically like, it's tough learning how to study again if you're not in school. I'd been working for 4 years. I hadn't done graduate school. So learning how to actually study again is rough. And that's, I think, why the 4 months before the exam, 1 hour each day recommendation sort of came up. You don't burn yourself out, but you have to set that time aside and learn how to take the exam.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw, but John Cooter just posted a link in the Zoom, and it looks like by the end of 2024, there will no longer be paper-based exams. They'll all be computer-based. So that does change things a bit. At least I know on the mechanical side, every mechanical engineer that I knew that took it before it was computer-based would bring a wagon of references. Now they're not allowed any. So definitely changes a little bit the study.
Yep.
I think.
Stay up on your state laws and
Yeah.
stay up on what's going on NCES. You know, if you think, you know, if you're in your junior year right now and you think you're going to be taking the PE 5 years from now, you know, understand what computer-based testing is like. If you've ever been to one of those places, you know, ask someone. All I'll say is dress comfortable.
Yeah.
And dress like they're going to have the AC turned down to 62 and dress like they're going to have the heat turned up to 80. It could be either or when you get in there.
Layers. And as Adam alluded to, snacks.
Sweatpants with zippers for the leg to open the legs for hot and cold. And, you know, t-shirt, a hoodie, you know, it could be warm, it could be cold.
Now I've heard all of you talk about the ethics part of the PE, and I feel like that's probably not something that they teach in college. How do you prepare for that portion of the exam?
You don't. They're common sense answers.
Oh, okay.
Your buddy asked you to put a PE stamp on something, you never looked at it. Should you stamp it? No.
Oh, it's like that. Oh, it's so it's not, I gotcha.
That's
how
how
I said do those questions first. Just get them out of the way.
And some of it is, like I said, I had to get the ethics when I got extra PEs beyond Colorado. And those ones were purely based on the rules and regulations. So basically the laws that state had. And it's like in, you know, based on law 62.3D, is this allowed? So then you just pull up that thing, goes 62.3D. What does it say? No, that's not allowed. So that's all you really had to do.
Yeah, I mean, this again is state by state or country by country. We do a lot of work in Canada and Alberta, for example. We'll do like a reciprocity type clause with Michigan and allow the technical portion, if you've got your PE, to give you the technical portion of the PEng, but you have to take an 8-hour ethics exam specific to the laws and the codes of Alberta.
It's because those Canadians are so nice. They're so nice.
Well, I see that in the comments, Robert brought up, and I have Texas, so this is true, for your continuing education credits, a lot of states require a minimum amount of ethics review every single time, every review period too. And you can sign up for courses for that ethics review. Some of them, you just have to read what is allowed. Some of them allow you just to reread the rules and regs for an hour, and that'll count as an hour of continuing ed for ethics. Depending what industry you're in, there's a lot of conferences that do continuing education at the conference to try and draw people in and provide a service to get people to go to those conferences.
I guess I thought it was.
I do a 2-hour one with like this online provider, and you know, just pay $60, get it out of the way. But I try to choose something that's, I think I'll learn something from this. Like one of them was, is it ethical to knowingly be over conservative in your engineering designs? And it kind of got you to think, because it's like, no, your job is to save people money. So, you know, challenge yourself and not be way over conservative in your designs. So I thought that was really interesting. Challenged me in my work after that.
What are the coolest projects that you guys have been able to work on because you had a PE?
I'll let Jake go first because I got to get visual aids.
Oh, now I'm really excited.
Yeah, so I think, for the company that I work for, not having a PE does not preclude you from working on projects, because the person with the PE isn't necessarily the person doing the work. The person with the PE is responsible for the final design and responsible to oversee the people executing the work. So I would say that like any cool project, none of them would have required that I had a PE because they all used entry-level employees along with people with PEs.
Adam, I feel like I maybe know what yours is, but I wonder if they're going to be the same.
I'm trying to find more visual aids.
Eli, do you have your visual aids ready? I'm
close
excited to see these visual aids for your cool
So,
project.
as I say, I've been doing my career for 15 years with power utilities. I design electrical substations, and if you're not a power person, there's the really tall, typically wood or steel poles, which is transmission. The voltage gets stepped down in a substation, which is typically the thing behind just a chain link fence that is humming a lot. And then the shorter poles or distribution poles that take it out to your house. So I design substations. This, if I can get my screen shared correctly, is just one photo of a substation. I don't know if that showed up yet or not.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's one that I did. If you're not in the industry, it's tough to say how complicated this is, and it's still under construction at this phase. But this was an 8 breaker and a half scheme, which is sort of equivalent if you were to design roads. If you normally designed a 2-lane road, this would be equivalent to like a 6-lane super highway type of design. Like, it was just that much of an overkill compared to what you normally do. So this was a fun one, and I designed all of it myself, including the electrical protection, wiring, the control to all the devices in the yard, besides the physical layout. So that was my coolest one so far.
How big is that, Eli? How much space does that take up? That looks huge.
It is extremely huge. Let me see if I can find, I don't know if Google Earth is updated yet or not, but that site is probably about 8 acres is how much room it took up. And while I find that, feel free to ask other questions or let other people jump in, so we don't have dead air.
Yeah, that's I am not an engineer, as you all know, but I am married to one, and know a little bit about engineering, and am impressed with that, because I know that takes a lot of work and skill and making sure that everything is just right. And I would also venture, Eli, there is some nervousness on something like that, is to make sure you're keeping everyone who's building it safe.
Yes. So can you see now the Google Earth top-down view?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This fenced area, right next to the farm field where there's rock and gray stuff, was the existing site that was there. I made it about 6 times bigger than that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's huge.
And just to open up a drawing to let you sort of see what happened. And I'm not trying to take up too much time, so it's just to show for scale what's happening here. Once my Adobe opens, there we go. I've got a top-down drawing depiction of what we did. There we go. Sorry. It's hopping around on me. So this little clouded area right here is that right there. That's all that remained. I tore everything else down and designed and built the rest of this. monstrosity. And this is a control building. For scale, this building is 48 feet long and 24 feet wide.
Oh my gosh.
So this fence line, we have a drawing that actually says what the fence line is somewhere. Not that way. There we go. Almost got it, sorry. We're getting there, I swear. There's just a lot of drawings. There we go. So we expanded the site to, it looks like 300 and almost 60 feet wide by 460 feet long.
Oh my gosh.
And we took up all of it.
That's huge. That's super cool.
And that was to tie in a wind generation farm into an existing site. And that wind farm was generating enough power to supply roughly 75,000 homes with power at full capacity.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
So that was my most fun one.
That's super cool. Mr. Roeder, you're the last one to share your super cool project. Oh, here we go.
Has nothing to do with engineering at all. But the PE license did differentiate me from the other people applying to be the building and safety inspector for the United States Antarctic program. So this is these are emperor penguins at McMurdo, just outside of McMurdo Station in Antarctica on August 23rd, 2015. It was also the first day I had seen the sun in 2.5 months. It was a wild day, but yeah, that was really cool.
I think you win.
I was wondering if you were going to pick something from Antarctica. I was like, I wonder if he's going to pick a project he worked on down there.
Oh, everything down there was weird. It's government. We can get into that another day.
Government's its own.
But getting down there, the PE license helped. So that's
Very
important.
cool. We have 5 minutes left, and so I just would love to wrap this up with what if you are encountering someone who's on the fence about taking the PE, what would you say to sway them to do it? Because I suspect we probably have some undergraduates who are thinking about taking it, but like Jake had said, he has it, but he doesn't really need it to do his job. What would you say to them? And Jake, I'm going to start with you because you're the odd.
Yeah. So I do need it to do my job. I need it to progress in my career. I have functioned as the, discipline lead and sealed drawings and stuff in the state of Michigan. I would say, for my major at least, a lot of people go into operations, they, run plants or they're process engineers. And I think, if you want to make doodads and make things that get sold in a store and design pieces of equipment or goods, then I would say don't take it. And I think that's going to be different from what you hear from Adam and Eli. To me, the only reason that I took it was because I like design and I wanted to be a design engineer. It's expensive. Took about $500 or costs about $500. If you are the kind of person that does a lot of studying, it's going to be very time intensive. So to me, I wouldn't recommend it unless you have a passion for design, and the design that you have a passion for requires the PE.
If you went to an ABET accredited program, if you graduated from an ABET accredited program, and you can find 3 people to sign for you, you have no excuse not to take the PE exam. I'm the one that's going to push you. You're eligible. Do it.
Yeah. Similar to Adam, I'll tailor my answer to more undergraduates right now. The thing we've glossed over is beyond the PE, you have to take the FE, the Fundamentals of Engineering exam. I highly recommend, if you're an undergraduate, you get to take that your senior year, sign up to take the FE exam, not the semester you're going to graduate, but the one before it. Because if you happen to fail it, you can take it the semester you do graduate. So you have a backup plan while you're still a student, you're still studying. Because the FE exam, as been alluded to, had 10 different areas of study between civil, electrical, mechanical, physics, chemistry. I knew 4 of them. I didn't know the other 6. I had to learn 5 of the other 6. And anytime I saw a fluid dynamics question, the answer was C and move on because I could never solve it anyway. Then similar to Adam, you know, the minute you're eligible and you can get people to reference for you, take the PE exam because it is a lot of hard work, but you're not doing yourself a detriment by having it. It's sort of like knowing how to do CPR and maybe having a CPR card. You hope maybe you never have to use CPR, but it doesn't hurt you to know it. Similarly, you may find yourself in a career you never need a PE exam to do what you really enjoy doing. But there's a lot of people, and I mean, look at COVID right now. What you thought your career was going to be could be completely different because of COVID. Your industry could have just shrunk massively and you have to go somewhere else. Already having a PE, even if you've never never practiced in the area you need to move to, may become a really big requirement or a differentiating factor to get hired somewhere else. So it does you no disservice by having your PE. And as soon as you can get it, the better, because life's pressures just get tougher as you get older. You don't have the same energy as you get older. As Amy will attest, kids will suck the energy out of you. So it's better just to do it while you have enough energy and you're young and you still sort of remember how to study, even if you haven't been doing it. It's so much easier than realizing you have to have it. And I have a coworker who was from Texas, never took the PE exam, and he worked in an industry and he had other people that could sign for him. And Texas had one where you could get grandfathered into a PE with 20 years of practical experience. Then he moved to Colorado. Colorado wouldn't accept that for reciprocity, and he had to figure out how to take the exam 20 plus years into his career. And it took him 2 or 3 times to figure out how to pass it, because at that point he had children, he was deeper in a career, he was managing people, and it's tough to try and figure out how to do that, and he needed it.
Wow.
Life advice from Wayne Gretzky: put yourself in a situation where you can get lucky. You know, I've had a couple 3 lucky breaks in my career that, you know, that they were just simply lucky breaks, but at least 2 of those came about, wouldn't have even been possible without the license.
To add on to Adam's, I told everyone at the beginning, I study Taekwondo. There was a master that it came through, and his thing was being lucky is where opportunity intersects with preparation. And that's exactly what having your PE is the opportunity came and you have your PE. Now you're lucky enough because the circumstances were there. That's sort of the same thing.
Yeah. This has been, oh my gosh, I have learned so much, you guys. I've been here for 8 years and I feel, not that I know everything about engineering, but I know a lot, and I learned a whole lot I didn't know tonight. So I want to thank Eli and Adam and Jake for their time tonight. If anyone has questions offline, we are happy to put their email and contact information out there, so you can get in touch with them. If you have any other questions, you can shoot Carrie or myself an email. We're happy to pass that along as well. I'm gonna turn it over to Carrie if she has any last words about the technical aspects of this, like the recording and the distribution.
Yeah, so I'm gonna pop my email into the chat area. If there's anyone on the call that wants to be put in touch with any of our panelists, or you have additional questions that we can help you get answers to, or resources that you're looking for, feel free to just send me an email over and I will help you do that. I will get this video recording up to our YouTube page. If you didn't know, we have a YouTube page. So we will have that on there momentarily, as soon as we can do that. But to our panelists, Adam, Eli, Jake, thank you guys so much for spending the evening with us and taking a little bit of time to enlighten, educate, whatever we want to call it, our young Triangle members. And I just appreciate everyone who turned out tonight.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. We are finished tonight, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
Thanks to the audience. You guys are making an investment in your future, and I'm happy to invest in you guys as well.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
See ya.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye, Joe.
The kids driving you nuts yet, Amy?
No, I can hear them though, and I'm just like, oh my God, what's going on up there? They're probably fighting about dinner or something crazy.
Well, I wasn't sure if you could get them out of the house with all the COVID stuff going on or not.
Yeah, they're at school. Ness has to wear a mask. Alex doesn't. But yeah, it's what I'm trying to remember what happened at